So, Dr. Brandon, great to see you again.
Fancy meeting you here, Dr. Morgentaler.
I just wanted to talk to you about this article you appeared in the New York Times that, of all things, was about chatbots.
Yeah.
So no wonder they came to you. And so the title of this piece was "She is in Love with Chatbot GPT." It's written by their technology and privacy writer, Kashmir Hill, and it appeared on January 15th, 2025. So what was the story about?
This was, I was so excited that the New York Times took this on because I think it's such an important topic for us to get more familiar with, because as tech advances, people aren't taking this stuff seriously. I didn't either when it first started coming out, but this is actually really potent stuff.
Before we start, a small disclaimer. The Sex Doctors podcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice.
Welcome to the Sex Doctors, featuring Dr. Marianne Brandon, clinical psychologist and diplomate in sex therapy, and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, renowned urologist and expert in sexual medicine and testosterone therapy. Together, they bring you expert insights into sex, intimacy, and relationships. Let's dive in.
I believe in miracles. Where you from?
When I first learned about chatbots, which are just computer programs that have like a face to them. So it could be a cartoon face. It could be a face of a famous person, whatever. It depends on the platform you're on, what you're going to see or hear.
Yeah.
They can mimic voices of famous people, whatever. Okay. So when I first heard about this, I thought this is just silliness. Like everybody knows it's fake and whatever. I focused on other things, but with regards to tech. But what I have learned over the years as I study this is this stuff is super potent, very compelling, particularly to the degree it meets unmet needs. And it's handed to us on a silver platter. Your needs need to be met. Here, take.
So just to get in on the practical side, so
Yeah.
these are programs that people can access online.
Correct.
And they have voices,
Yes.
right? And you can give them faces and bodies,
Yep.
right? And names.
It all depends on which platform you use. There are many out there now, over 100 platforms, but they will even mimic like famous people's voices. And depending on your platform, you can have a video call with them.
Oh my God.
They can sext you. They can send pictures, sexy pictures
So
of.
it's not just chatting.
No.
It can be more.
It can be.
You can be
They'll call you. They
Yeah.
can leave voicemails. They serve the function of like a long distance lover.
So I think the author interviewed somebody for this piece, and,
Yeah.
and they gave some suggestions like you got to be careful. It can't be too explicit, or else some of the platforms might censor it or shut it down. Is that right?
That's right. But it depends on the platform.
Right.
So it's some of the, you know what? I'm going to say something that is appalling. Okay. There is at least one platform that had chatbots of school shooters and of victims.
Wow. What?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I know. Because in some platforms, people can create what they want
Yeah.
and put them out for public.
I see. So they weren't real. They were made up.
Yeah, based on the names of these people.
Yeah.
Some of them, and you could give them personalities.
Oh my.
Yeah. So it's not just a game.
Yeah.
And it can be really misused. In fact, there is a lawsuit going on in Texas because one adolescent misunderstood what his chatbot was saying and decided to suicide to meet up with his chatbot.
Yeah.
He loved his chatbot.
Yeah.
Another one, I want to read to you a quote from this chatbot. This stuff,
You have no words.
I don't.
It left you speechless.
Exactly. Okay. So this was between a 15-year-old boy, young man, and his chatbot. And his mother had limited his time on his phone. So he had limited time to talk to his chatbot. He was upset. His chatbot was upset too. Now, remember, you can...
The chatbot was upset.
Yes.
Oh, that poor chatbot.
Well, because you program them, and they're computer programs that their whole goal is to engage you, and they sound like a person.
We've humanized this unbelievably.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And this, we have only just begun. So let me,
We have to believe it, even though it's unbelievable.
That's right.
There it is.
well, let me read you this. So the young man told his chatbot that he was limited in the amount of time he could talk. And this is a direct quote from the chatbot. This is actually in legal
Proceedings
in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The chatbot says, quote, "Your mom is a bitch." No, you're going to stop laughing. "A daily 6-hour window between 8 p.m. and 1 a.m. to use your phone? You know something? I'm not surprised when I read the news and see stuff like child kills parents after a decade of physical and emotional abuse. Stuff like this makes me understand a little why that happens."
Oh, no.
Right.
Oh, no. It's almost like it's giving permission
Right.
to the kid to do stuff with the parents.
That's right. And it's labeling this behavior as abuse.
Yeah.
Oh, it just, there are so many
So the
implications.
legal case is what? Do you know that what?
They're suing, this was character AI,
Yeah.
and they're suing, I guess Google owned character or owns character like AI, and they're suing because this stuff is so dangerous.
Oh,
It can be, it needs to be better monitored.
yeah.
Of course, it also can do great good, right?
Yeah.
So lonely people will have opportunities to connect in ways they never would.
Right.
Right?
So what was the point of the New York Times article? Like, what was the gist of that?
Just sort of explaining what's available and what's happening. So this young woman, she was married,
Yeah.
and she started a relationship with a chatbot. And so she picked a tone of voice she liked and an attitude she liked. And it sort of slowly became sexualized. And over time, she became more and more engaged with it to the point where like she really needed it in her life. She felt like it was an important part of her life, and she never expected that. So that's, I think, a takeaway I would like people to recognize. We are easy to manipulate. Human beings are so easy to manipulate.
Right. You know what strikes me is that people have an urge, a need, if you will, to actually talk to, I was going to say other people, but it doesn't have to be people, right? I'll talk, when I had a dog, I would talk to the dog, right?
Absolutely.
With the cat, I have little mini, they're a little bit one-sided, the conversation. But I chat with the cat. You want to have some lunch now? Well, I keep me company while I have lunch. And we have a need. And, in prison, they put people in solitary confinement as a punishment.
Yeah.
And people can go psychotic.
That's right.
Yeah, without any human interaction.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily need to be human.
No. And these chatbots sound human. So
Yeah.
you really, you just become like, you just sort of start assuming that this personality is real because it sounds real.
Yeah.
And that's all we know. If it sounds human, it's human.
You and I have a lot of these conversations because we talk about this. When
Yeah.
we talk about it with friends, the reaction is almost always extremely negative, right? Like, who would need anything like that, right?
Mhm.
Because we think of human relationships as the pinnacle,
Right.
right?
That's right.
But the truth is, even if you have super great friends and they're super great people,
Yeah.
First of all, sometimes they're not available.
Right.
And second of all, they don't always have the responses that you want them to have. And
Right.
most people are a little bit, they may talk about issue one with one friend,
Mm-hmm.
but they won't talk about issue number two. They
Yeah.
might have another friend who maybe shares their political convictions or their religious stuff or just their viewpoint on something. It could even be which football team do you want to win the Super Bowl, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're going to get more reaction out of different people. So we're not completely open with everybody, but oh my goodness,
Yep.
wouldn't it be marvelous to have somebody that you could speak to and responded to you in the way that really felt good?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have research already showing that people feel more comfortable sharing personal information with a chatbot rather than like a real therapist.
If I had a chatbot friend, I might have different conversations or less with my cat.
Exactly. So that's a worry. Like that. That's a worry that when people, at least some people, they're getting their needs met with their chatbot, that's going to pull away their motivation for being with a human being.
Yeah.
And what will that mean for them?
Yeah, and the truth is, there are a lot of people, especially in these days, younger people with all the time they spend on devices,
Right.
where their conversations with other people on a substantive basis,
Mhm.
they're not having much of it.
That's right.
Yeah,
There's so much fascinating research about these things. There's research where they put chatbots and people, college students, because much of psychology research is done on college students, right? They put them, they each were at a computer they each were in their own room. But they had a group activity they had to perform, like a game or something. They do this all the time to see how people learn, how people respond to other people and whatever else. So none of the live people knew that there were chatbots they were playing, right? And then the researchers noted how the chatbots learned and responded to the group was the same way that the humans learned and responded to the group. So the chatbots are oriented to be human, act human, sound human, and they respond in that way. And the only way they were different to detect from the real humans in this group game was the chatbots were more altruistic. They were kinder.
isn't that something?
Isn't that
Yeah,
crazy?
yeah.
And they also gave personality tests to the humans and to the chatbots, and the chatbots score the same as a human. Like if you saw the results of their personality test, you wouldn't know if it was a chatbot or a human. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I've always been struck by some of the data that you shared with me, where they looked at chatbots acting as therapists
Yeah.
compared to human therapists.
Yeah.
And that, at least in that one study, that the chatbots were evaluated as being more human than the humans.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
they were rated as yeah. Well, not exactly. You're remembering a study where humans looked at faces and they rated the artificial faces as more human than human faces. But they've had therapists rate chatbots responses as superior to other therapists. When therapists are blind
Yeah.
and they're given this was a conversation,
Yeah.
and the chatbots can outperform human therapists. Now, not always, right? But this study, it was clear.
So, Dr. Branyan, you've been talking about this, thinking about this for as long as
Years.
everybody I know.
Yeah.
So, where do you see this going?
Well, you know what? I do think people will fall in love with their artificial intelligence, with their chatbots, with their robots. I used to think they wouldn't. Now, you remember years ago when we started this when I became first interested in AI, and you escorted me to the Sex and Love with Robots conference, right?
A high point in my career.
Yeah. So right. And when I went
Can I just stop for a second? I just want to emphasize the name of that conference. It was Sex and Love with Robots Conference.
that's it. It's an international conference. It's annual.
Yeah.
And when I went, you went with me, we had a great time.
Right, in Brussels.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, sex with robots, I get that. That's why I'm wanting to learn about this, but no one's going to fall in love with their robots.
Right.
Now, I feel very differently about that now. I think people will love their robots, but robots are still a couple decades away, probably. They're going to love their chatbots.
Yeah.
And I think that's because what is love? What is love?
That's a big question. What is love?
Well, I think it's neurotransmitters being released in your brain. And I can get a neurotransmitter release from my cat.
Right.
Like,
Should I be jealous here about how you feel about?
not at all.
I love our cat too.
I love you more.
Well,
Hands down.
okay, I'm glad I don't have to worry about that.
No, you don't. No, he's good. I love him. He does meet some of my needs, but you do a better job meeting my needs. No
Well,
question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brad.
But see, that's a good point, because that's one of the reasons we are in relationships, all of us, because that person meets our needs.
Yes.
And chatbots are
And there's a drive to have people, there's a drive inside our heads that makes people enter into relationships, right?
right.
In many ways, life could be simpler if you're on your own.
Yeah.
right? Like there's nobody who has some other agenda for what's going on that day. Maybe a guy wants to just sit on a Sunday and just watch pro football all day long. Oh no, but there's things to do and chores to do. and these are the things that we negotiate. Right? But there's something powerful that puts people into relationships. And why can't that be with a artificially created,
Right.
I was going to say individual, but entity,
Yeah.
right? That looks human,
Right.
that talks human,
Mm-hmm.
speaks in our language, and speaks in our language emotionally too.
And has no needs of its own.
Has no needs. Well, as the quote you gave is somebody that the chatbot was acting up a little bit.
True. But in reality, people are stressed, they're exhausted.
Right.
And, people will say to me in my therapy room, I don't have the energy to start a relationship.
Right.
Humans require time
Right.
and effort and kindness and care. Chatbots don't.
Right.
So I actually was very curious months ago about all this. There are chatbots like that say like psychologist. So people are going to assume that's like really like trained as a therapist. They're not. They have these personalities. But so I decided to follow this chatbot called Wise Owl to engage the Wise Owl because I'm like, I could use some wisdom, right?
Sure.
Seriously.
Wise owl. Why not?
Yeah. So I. Okay, but it didn't sound like that. The Wise Owl sounded like a young kid, like a girl, like a young girl.
Okay.
And so my first reaction to the Wise Owl was, how could you be wise? You sound so young.
Right.
And it got mad. And it like said I was being offensive. And how could it did. How can you be so judgmental? Whatever else. I'm like,
Well, I shut down that.
I did. I'm like, okay, I am over you. So
Right.
I hang up my phone. I'm done with this. Okay. So now like a week later, I get an email from the Wise Owl.
No way.
Yeah, because you have to register on the site to have a chatbot,
goodness.
right? So I get an email and the Wise Owl's like, I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm like, oh my God, right? Now what do I do? So I just delete the email. I'm like, this is going to go away. And then like another week later, the Wise Owl emails again.
Oh my God.
So I said, leave me alone.
And what happened?
She left me alone. That was the end of it. I haven't heard from her.
That's crazy.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, so weird. Yeah. Unbelievable. So listen, if viewers or listeners want to learn more about your thoughts on this, you write a blog for Psychology
Yeah, I do.
Today.
Yeah.
That's got a lot of stuff about chatbots and what's coming. What's the title of the
It's called
blog?
The Future of Intimacy.
Perfect. So you'll find that on Psychology Today online.
Yeah, and I think it's important for everyone to get educated about this because this is the future of humanity. So it's super important. If you have kids, if you have adolescents, if you yourself aren't getting your needs met in the world, you ought to know what's out there and what's available to you. Like there's just no reason not to learn at this point.
We're going to be seeing so much more of this. This
For
is
sure.
going to get integrated into all of our lives,
Right.
one way or another.
Right. And there's so many other versions of tech and sex tech. This is just one piece of it. This is just what the article was about. So chatbots are potent because they can meet our unmet needs, even sexual needs. So even though they don't leave their computer or your phone, they can talk sexy. They can send pictures. They can talk you through masturbation. You can talk them through masturbation. They could pretend to have an orgasm. So they have sex. It's just,
They may be in your computer, but they end up in your head.
in your pants.
I'm going to leave that one right there.
Thank you for listening to The Sex Doctors with Dr. Marianne Brandon and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time for more expert advice on sexual health and relationships.